Her siblings turned a treasured barn into a drunken circus and tore down the very walls that held their grandmother's legacy. What they never guessed? One hidden clause in the will would leave them penniless by sunrise. The Sterling family ranch sat nestled in a picturesque valley, framed by distant mountains and rolling meadows that stretched as far as the eye could see. As Jade's sedan bumped along the gravel driveway for the first time since the funeral, her twins, Talia and Jake, sat in sullen silence in the back seat. At 16, they were at that difficult age where everything parents did was wrong, and being uprooted from their suburban life to move to the middle of nowhere was apparently the ultimate injustice. "I still don't understand why we had to move here," Jake muttered. "We could have just sold it." Jade gripped the steering wheel tighter. "This is an opportunity, Jake, a chance for us to start fresh. The rental market in the city was killing us, and here we have a home. A beautiful home that's been in our family for generations." "Our friends are back in Seattle," Talia chimed in, not looking up from her phone. "Our whole lives were there." "You'll make new friends," Jade said with forced cheerfulness. "And you can still talk to your old friends online. It's not like we've moved to the moon." As they rounded the final bend in the driveway, the main house came into view, a sprawling ranch-style home with a wide porch wrapped around the front, its weathered wood speaking to decades of Montana winters and summers. But it wasn't the house that made Jade catch her breath. It was the massive structure behind it, Luna's wing. The barn was enormous, its restored timbers gleaming in the afternoon sun. Unlike most barns, this one had been lovingly converted into an event venue years ago by Jade's grandmother, Luna Sterling. The front featured large, custom-made doors with intricate woodwork showing phases of the moon, Luna's trademark. What made the venue truly unique, however, was what hung suspended from the ceiling inside, her grandfather's vintage World War II aircraft, the Silver Luna, lovingly restored and mounted as if in mid-flight above the dance floor. "That's actually kind of cool," Jake admitted reluctantly, catching sight of the barn. Jade smiled. "I spent summers here when I was younger. Grandma Luna would let me help when they had weddings. It was magical." As they pulled up to the house, Mr. Hartwell's car was already parked in the driveway. The elderly attorney who had handled her grandmother's estate stood waiting on the porch, leather portfolio in hand, his silver hair ruffled by the gentle Montana breeze. "Ms. Wilson," he greeted her warmly. "Welcome home." "Thank you, Mr. Hartwell," Jade replied. "These are my children, Talia and Jake." The twins mumbled polite hellos, still obviously unhappy about the situation. "I've brought the final paperwork for you to sign," Mr. Hartwell explained, "and I thought I should give you a full briefing on the property situation." Something in his tone made Jade uneasy. "Is there a problem?" "Nothing we can't handle. Let's go inside, shall we?" The interior of the ranch house was just as Jade remembered it, comfortable, worn furniture, walls lined with bookshelves and family photographs, the lingering scent of her grandmother's lavender sachets, still detectable beneath the mustiness of a house that had stood empty for weeks. Talia and Jake wandered off to explore while Jade and Mr. Hartwell settled at the kitchen table. "First, the good news," Mr. Hartwell began. "Luna's wing is booked solid for the next year. Weddings, anniversary parties, corporate retreats. Your grandmother built quite a reputation for the venue. It's the primary source of income for the property, and it's substantial. However," the lawyer continued, his expression growing serious, "there are significant debts against the property. Your grandmother took out loans for major repairs 3 years ago, the roof, structural improvements, a new heating system. The monthly payments are considerable." He slid a paper across the table, and Jade's eyes widened at the figure. "That's more than I was making at both my jobs combined. The event bookings should cover it with careful management, but it will be tight, especially in the winter months when there are fewer events, and the property will need ongoing maintenance. I can handle it. I'll learn the business quickly. Grandma Luna showed me a lot during those summers. There's one more thing you should be prepared for, Ms. Wilson. Your siblings." The mention of her younger brother and sister sent a chill through Jade. She hadn't spoken to either of them since the funeral. "Edward and Kendra believe they should have received equal shares of the property," Mr. Hartwell explained gently. "That's putting it mildly. Edward called me a manipulative gold digger at the funeral reception. Kendra suggested I'd coerced Grandma Luna when she was too sick to know better. Your grandmother was of completely sound mind when she made her will. I personally witnessed it, along with her doctor. She knew exactly what she was doing. But why did she leave everything to me?" Jade asked the question that had been haunting her since the reading of the will. "Your grandmother had her reasons, Ms. Wilson. She felt you would be the best steward for the property and its legacy." Something in his tone suggested there was more to the story, but before Jade could press further, the sound of tires on gravel outside caught their attention. Through the kitchen window, Jade watched as 2 vehicles pulled into the driveway. A sleek black Mercedes SUV, and a red sports car. Speaking of your siblings, it appears they've arrived. The front door burst open without a knock, and Edward Wilson strode in as if he owned the place. At 38, he carried himself with the arrogance of someone used to getting his way. Behind him came Kendra, 35, and immaculately put together as always, her lawyer's analytical gaze taking in every detail of the house, as if cataloging items for a claim. Well, Edward said, the prodigal granddaughter has returned to claim her spoils. This is my home now, Edward, Jade replied evenly. Kendra laughed sharply. This should have been our home too, or at least a third of it should have been. But somehow you managed to convince Grandma that you deserved everything. Mr. Hartwell cleared his throat. Miss Sterling made her wishes very clear. Save it, Edward cut him off. We know whose side you're on. He turned back to Jade. We want to talk to our sister alone. The lawyer looked to Jade, who nodded reluctantly. It's okay, Mr. Hartwell. We're family. We should be able to have a civil conversation. I'll be in town for the next few days if you need anything, he said. Let's cut to the chase, Edward said, sitting down uninvited at the kitchen table. This property is worth millions. You can't possibly manage it alone. You have no experience running a business. I've been working since I was 16, Jade countered, including helping Grandma Luna with events here every summer until I got married. Playing hostess at a few weddings hardly qualifies you to run a 200-acre ranch and event venue, Kendra scoffed. I'm willing to learn, Jade insisted. Edward leaned forward, his expression suddenly serious. You don't understand the financial reality, Jade. This place is drowning in debt. Mr. Hartwell explained the situation, Jade replied. For how long? Kendra challenged. That barn needs a new eastern support wall within the year. The irrigation system for the hayfields is failing. The house itself needs at least 80, zero in repairs to meet current codes for a commercial property. Did your precious Mr. Hartwell mention all that? Edward pressed his advantage. We've had the property assessed, Jade. The smart move, the only move, is to sell it now, while it's still desirable. Split the proceeds 3 ways, and we all walk away with enough to make a fresh start. Sell it? This is our family legacy. Grandma Luna wanted it preserved. That's why she left it to me instead of us? Edward finished. Because we couldn't be trusted to preserve the precious family home. That's not what I meant, Jade backpedaled. It's exactly what you meant, Kendra snapped. You always were Grandma's favorite. That's not true, Jade protested. Grandma Luna loved all of us. Yet here you are with everything, and we have nothing, Edward said coldly. Jade took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I'm not selling the ranch. It's my home now, and my children's home. We've been patient, Edward said, his tone shifting to something harder. We gave you time to come to your senses, but our patience has limits, Jade. What's that supposed to mean? Jade asked. Kendra pulled a legal document from her designer handbag. We're contesting the will. The paperwork has already been filed. Jade stared at the document in disbelief. On what grounds? Undue influence, Kendra replied. Grandma was 84 and had been declining for months before she died. You were the only one who spent extended time alone with her in those final weeks. It won't be hard to convince a court that you manipulated her. That's a lie, Jade exclaimed. Grandma Luna was sharp as a tack until the very end. Kendra raised an eyebrow. I'm a pretty good lawyer, Jade, and I'm very convincing in court. Edward stood, straightening his expensive suit. Here's the deal. You can fight us in court, a process that will take years and drain whatever resources you have, or you can agree to sell the property now and split it 3 ways. This is blackmail, Jade said. This is family business, Edward corrected with a cold smile. You have 1 week to decide. Mom, what's going on? All 3 adults turned to see Talia standing there, her eyes wide with concern. Jake appeared behind his sister, his earlier sullenness replaced by protective wariness as he assessed the tension in the room. Nothing, sweetheart, Jade said quickly. Your Uncle Edward and Aunt Kendra were just leaving. Uncle Edward? Jake repeated with obvious skepticism. The same uncle who called you names at Great-Grandma's funeral. Edward's face tightened. You should teach your son some manners, Jade. And you should learn some yourself. Jake shot back. Kendra's lip curled in distaste. Charming. Just like their father, I see. Leave my kids out of this, Jade warned. 1 week, Edward reminded her. After they left, the house seemed unnaturally quiet. Jade sank back into her chair, the reality of her situation crashing down around her. Mom? Talia approached cautiously. Are we going to lose the ranch? Jade looked up at her children, Jake's defiant stance, Talia's worried eyes. No, this is our home now. Your great-grandmother wanted us to have it, and I'm not going to let anyone take it away from us. Those people were jerks, Jake declared. Language. Jade corrected automatically. What are we going to do? Talia asked. First, we're going to unpack. Then we're going to learn everything there is to know about running this place. Your great-grandmother believed I could do this, and I'm not going to let her down." For the first time since they'd arrived, Jade saw a flicker of interest in her daughter's eyes. "Can we see inside the barn? The one with the airplane?" Jade smiled, grateful for the change of subject. "Luna's wing? Absolutely. In fact, we have a wedding booked there this weekend. I was planning to call the staff your great-grandmother had on payroll, but maybe you two would like to help out instead. Get a feel for the business?" "Actually," Jake said, surprising her, the interior of Luna's wing took her breath away, just as it always had. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, illuminating the gleaming wooden floors below and catching the polished metal of the vintage aircraft suspended from the reinforced beams above. The silver Luna, her grandfather's pride and joy, seemed to float in midair, its propeller and insignia preserved perfectly, a silent guardian watching over the space. "Whoa," Jake breathed, his adolescent coolness momentarily forgotten as he stared up at the aircraft. "That's actually awesome. Your great-grandfather was a pilot," Jade explained. "He flew this plane in World War II. When he came home, he couldn't bear to part with it. That's how the barn got its name, Luna's Wing. A play on your great-grandmother's name and the fact that there's literally a wing above us." Talia asked. "For many years," Jade nodded, "until his health wouldn't allow it anymore. Then they restored it and mounted it here when they converted the barn into an event venue." Later that night, after the twins had gone to bed, Jade sat at the kitchen table surrounded by the financial documents Mr. Hartwell had left her, and her confidence wavered. The debts were substantial. The operating costs were higher than she'd anticipated. 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Jade had successfully navigated her first 2 events at Luna's Wing, a wedding and an anniversary party, with the help of her grandmother's experienced staff and, surprisingly, her children. Talia had discovered a talent for decoration and organization, while Jake had proven himself surprisingly capable with the sound system and logistics. The legal threat from Edward and Kendra loomed, but they had gone suspiciously quiet after their ultimatum. So when Edward called on a Tuesday morning, his voice uncharacteristically warm, Jade was cautiously optimistic. "I've been thinking, Jade," he said, the usual edge absent from his tone. "Maybe we got off on the wrong foot. This whole inheritance situation has been stressful for everyone." "I agree," Jade said. "Kendra and I have been talking, and we want to try a different approach. More familial." "What did you have in mind?" Jade asked. "We'd like to host a family reunion at Luna's Wing," Edward proposed. "A proper celebration with extended family and close friends. A chance for all of us to heal and move forward together." "That's actually a lovely idea, Edward. We thought the 3rd weekend in July would be perfect. I know the venue is booked solid for paying events, but surely you can make an exception for family." Jade checked her calendar. There was indeed a gap that weekend, a canceled booking that she hadn't yet been able to refill. "I think we could make that work," she agreed. "How many people were you thinking?" "Around 200, Edward replied. "Family, old friends of Grandma, some business associates who adored her." Jade nearly choked. 200. That's a massive event, Edward. Don't worry about that," Edward interrupted smoothly. "Kendra and I will handle all the arrangements and costs. You just need to provide the venue. Consider it our olive branch." "All right, but I want to be involved in the planning. This is still my property." "Of course," Edward assured her. "Kendra will be in touch with details. And Jade, thank you." After hanging up, Jade sat thoughtfully at her desk in what had been her grandmother's study. The walls were lined with photographs of Luna's life, her wedding day, holding her children as babies, standing proudly in front of the newly renovated Luna's Wing. Would she have wanted this reunion? Probably, Jade decided. Luna had always valued family above all else. Over the next 2 weeks, however, Jade began to notice troubling signs. Kendra sent only vague updates about the reunion plans. When Jade asked specific questions about catering, setup, or scheduling, the answers were evasive or delayed. Twice, she spotted unfamiliar men on the property, apparently taking measurements and photographs of Luna's Wing. When confronted, they claimed to be with the event planning team, but couldn't produce any identification. "Something's not right," Jade confided to Angela Hayes, her grandmother's longtime assistant who had stayed on to help her learn the business. Angela, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, frowned. Those two were always trouble, even as children. Luna saw it, even if she never said it outright. "What do you mean?" Jade asked. "It's not my place to speak ill of your family, Jade. Please, Angela, I need to understand what's happening. Your grandmother worried about their values. Edward's always been more concerned with appearances than substance. And Kendra. Well, Luna once told me she feared Kendra saw the law as a weapon rather than a shield." Jade thought about her brother's failing real estate ventures, his expensive tastes, the rumors of gambling debts, and Kendra's bitter divorce proceedings, her ruthless reputation in the courtroom. Had Grandma Luna seen something in them that Jade had missed all these years? Her suspicions grew when, 3 days before the reunion, a large truck arrived at the property bearing the logo of Premier Party Rentals. The driver presented Jade with a delivery order for massive speakers, lighting equipment, and a DJ booth. "There must be some mistake," Jade told the driver. "This is supposed to be a family memorial event, not a nightclub setup." The driver shrugged. "Lady, I just deliver what's on the order. This was requested by Mr. Edward Wilson, paid in full." That evening, Jade tried calling both Edward and Kendra repeatedly, but neither answered. The night before the reunion, Jade was awakened at midnight by the sound of vehicles on the property. From her bedroom window, she watched as 3 large trucks pulled up to Luna's wing. Men in work clothes began unloading equipment that certainly didn't look like standard event supplies. One truck bore the logo of Henderson Construction equipment. For a family reunion? Jade hurried outside, approaching a burly man who appeared to be supervising the unloading. "Excuse me," she called. "What's going on here?" The man barely glanced at her. "We're with the setup crew for tomorrow's event. Mr. Wilson approved everything. I'm the owner of this property," Jade said firmly. The man finally looked at her properly. "Look, lady, I'm just following orders. Mr. Wilson said everything was cleared with the property owner." "I am the property owner," Jade repeated. Before the man could respond, a familiar voice called from the darkness. "It's a bit late for you to start caring about details now, isn't it, Jade?" "What are you doing, Edward?" she demanded. "This doesn't look like a setup for a family reunion, doesn't it?" he replied with mock innocence. "Perhaps your idea of a family gathering is different from mine. These look like construction tools," Jade said. "Don't be dramatic, Jade. It's for the staging. We're going to have quite a show tomorrow." "I want to see the full plan," Jade insisted, "right now. Or I'm calling the sheriff to have these people removed from my property." Edward laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Go ahead. Sheriff Daniels is an old friend. In fact, he's on the guest list for tomorrow." With growing unease, Jade realized she was being outmaneuvered. Something was very wrong, but she couldn't prove it. "The event starts at noon tomorrow," Edward said. "I suggest you and your kids make plans to be elsewhere. This is an adult gathering after all." "This is my property," Jade repeated. Edward shrugged. "Suit yourself, but don't say I didn't warn you." Inside the house, she found Talia waiting for her in the kitchen. "Mom, what's happening?" "Just some early deliveries for tomorrow's event. Nothing to worry about." "You don't trust them, do you?" "Uncle Edward and Aunt Kendra." "No, honey, I don't. Something doesn't feel right about this whole reunion." "Jake and I don't have to go to Grandma's friend's house tomorrow," Talia suggested. "We could stay and help you keep an eye on things." Jade had arranged for the twins to spend the day with Angela, thinking they would be bored at a family memorial event. "Actually, that might be a good idea," Jade agreed. "But stay close to the house, okay? I don't want you near Luna's wing until I figure out what they're planning." The next morning dawned bright and clear, a perfect Montana summer day that belied the tension in the air. By 10 o'clock, vehicles began arriving. Not the sedans and sensible cars of family mourners that Jade had expected, but flashy sports cars and luxury SUVs. "These aren't family members," Jake observed from the front porch where he and Jade were watching the arrivals. "I don't recognize any of them." "Neither do I." Jade admitted by 11:30 the parking area was overflowing, and music had started blasting from Luna's wing. "Mom," Talia said, "I think you need to see this." She held out her phone, open to Edward's Instagram account. The most recent post from just minutes ago showed a crowded bar setup inside Luna's wing. The caption read, "Epic rager at the family ranch. Time to make some unforgettable memories, or forget them completely. Party barn, family property, sorry not sorry." Jade felt sick. This wasn't a family reunion at all. It was some kind of massive party, with Luna's wing being marketed as a party barn. But why? What was Edward's real goal? At precisely noon, as more guests continued to stream in, Kendra's car pulled up to the main house. Unlike the party guests, she was dressed in business attire, her expression coolly professional as she approached Jade on the porch. "Quite the turnout," she remarked casually. "This isn't a family reunion," Jade said. Kendra shrugged. "Semantics. It's a gathering on family property." "What is this really about, Kendra?" Jade demanded. "Edward has quite the following on social media these days. His parties are legendary. This one will be talked about for years." "I'm shutting it down," Jade declared. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Kendra advised. "You might not like what happens if you try to interfere." Before Jade could respond, a tremendous crash sounded from the direction of Luna's wing, followed by cheers and applause. Jade's blood ran cold. She rushed past Kendra, hurrying toward the barn with her children following close behind. What she saw as she burst through the doors stopped her in her tracks. The beautiful venue she had inherited was in chaos. The carefully preserved wooden floors were already sticky with spilled drinks. Someone had managed to climb onto one of the lower wings of the suspended aircraft and was now swinging from it precariously while onlookers cheered. But worst of all, at the far end of the barn, several men in work clothes, the same ones who had arrived in the midnight delivery, were systematically dismantling part of the eastern wall, the very section Kendra had mentioned needed repairs. They weren't fixing it. They were removing supporting beams. "Stop!" Jade screamed, rushing toward them. "What are you doing?" One of the workers glanced at her, then looked past her shoulder and nodded. Jade turned to find Edward standing there, a drink in his hand and a cold smile on his face. "Problem, sis?" he asked. "You're destroying the barn," Jade shouted. "I prefer to think of it as remodeling. This place is outdated anyway. Too stuffy. The party barn has a much better ring to it, don't you think?" "You're insane," Jade breathed, the full scope of his plan finally becoming clear. "You're trying to destroy Luna's wing, so I'll have no choice but to sell the property." "Give the lady a prize," Edward Mock toasted her. "Though destroy is such an ugly word. We're just helping it along to its inevitable conclusion." Jade lunged for her phone, but Edward was quicker. He nodded to someone in the crowd, and suddenly 2 burly men were blocking her path. "I wouldn't cause a scene if I were you," Edward advised. "This is criminal damage," Jade protested. "Sue me," Edward suggested with a smirk. "Oh wait, you can't afford to. Legal battles are expensive, aren't they?" A new commotion near the center of the barn drew their attention. Someone had managed to climb all the way into the cockpit of the Silver Luna and was now attempting to remove the vintage control stick as a souvenir. "No," Jade cried, rushing toward the aircraft. But she was too late. As she watched in horror, the man yanked the control stick free with a metallic screech, holding it aloft like a trophy while the crowd cheered. Jade turned desperately to her children. "Jake, call the sheriff. Talia, try to find Angela. We need help." They nodded and rushed out, but Jade's momentary distraction had cost her. When she turned back, Edward was gone, swallowed by the crowd of partiers who continued to drink, dance, and inadvertently, or perhaps deliberately, damage the beautiful venue. For the next hour, Jade tried desperately to contain the destruction. She begged guests to respect the property, attempted to stop the workers who continued to remove critical supports from the wall, and tried repeatedly to reach Sheriff Daniels, only to be told he was unavailable. By mid-afternoon, Luna's wing was barely recognizable. The floor was littered with broken glass and spilled drinks. Someone had spray-painted graffiti across one wall. The vintage aircraft hung at a dangerous angle, parts of it now missing thanks to souvenir hunters, and the eastern wall, stripped of key supports, had begun to visibly sag. Outside, Jade found Jake and Talia with Angela Hayes. "The sheriff won't come," Angela confirmed grimly. "I tried everything. They're destroying everything," Jade said, her voice breaking. "The barn, the plane, Grandma Luna's legacy. That's the point," Angela said quietly. "But why like this?" Talia asked. "Because your uncle is drowning in gambling debts," Angela revealed. "And your aunt's divorce left her with less than half of what she expected. They need money, and they need it now." "How do you know that?" Jade asked. "Luna kept tabs on all of you," Angela explained. "She worried about Edward and Kendra's choices for years. It's partly why she left everything to you, Jade." A tremendous crash from inside Luna's wing cut their conversation short. Jade rushed back in to find a section of the eastern wall had collapsed, bringing down part of the roof with it. Through the dust and chaos, Jade spotted Edward and Kendra standing together near the entrance. "Are you happy now?" Jade demanded. "Collateral damage," Edward shrugged. "Besides, that's what insurance is for. Insurance that will pay out to me, not you," Jade pointed out, her voice shaking with rage. Kendra's smile was reptilian. "About that, you might want to check your coverage. There seems to have been an administrative error with your policy renewal." "What did you do?" "Let's just say there was a loophole in Grandma's policy," Kendra replied smoothly. "As her legal representative for many years, I was still listed as an authorized contact. It was simple enough to call and point out that the property use had changed from residential with occasional events to full commercial." "You canceled my insurance?" Jade whispered. "Not canceled," Kendra corrected primly. "The company did that themselves once they understood the situation. I merely provided information." The sound of sirens finally cut through the pounding music, which someone had inexplicably left running despite the partial collapse. Fire trucks and emergency vehicles pulled into the driveway, responding not to Jade's calls but to the obvious structural emergency. As emergency personnel swarmed the property, Edward leaned close to Jade. "Here's what happens next," he said quietly. "You'll discover you have no insurance coverage for this disaster. The estimates for repairs will be astronomical, far more than you can afford with your existing debt. The county will condemn the structure as unsafe, meaning you'll lose your primary source of income from events. Without that income, you'll default on Grandma's loans. And then what? Jade asked, though she already knew the answer. And then, Kendra picked up smoothly, the bank will foreclose, the property will go up for auction, and we'll be there to buy it. Why not just contest the will honestly? Jade demanded. Edward's expression hardened. Because you were right about one thing, Grandma's will would have stood up in court. She was too careful, and Hartwell too thorough. This way, we get what we want without the legal fees and uncertain outcome. You're destroying our grandmother's legacy out of spite. Jade said. No, Edward corrected. We're reclaiming what should have been ours to begin with. If we can't have it the way she left it, we'll remake it in our own image. As firefighters secured the collapsed section and paramedics treated minor injuries among the remaining guests, Jade stood in the wreckage of Luna's wing, surrounded by broken glass, splintered wood, and the damaged aircraft that had meant so much to her grandparents. The morning after the disastrous reunion, Jade stood in the ruins of Luna's wing, surveying the damage in the harsh light of day. Without the pounding music and chaotic crowd, the destruction was even more heartbreaking. Mom? Talia's voice came softly from behind her. The insurance adjuster is here. Jade nodded numbly, bracing herself for the conversation she knew was coming. The adjuster, a middle-aged man with a clipboard and sympathetic eyes, confirmed her worst fears within minutes. I'm sorry, Ms. Wilson, he said, reviewing the documents on his tablet. It appears your policy was indeed flagged for review and subsequently invalidated 3 weeks ago due to a change in usage classification. My sister made that call without my knowledge or permission, Jade explained desperately. She misrepresented the situation to force a cancellation. I understand, and that may constitute insurance fraud, which you could pursue legally, but that wouldn't reinstate the coverage retroactively. After he left, Jade sat on the steps of the main house, trying to process the magnitude of the disaster. The structural engineer who had arrived shortly after the adjuster had estimated repairs at nearly 800, with the venue now unusable, and with her grandmother's loan payments still due, bankruptcy seemed inevitable. What are we going to do? Jake asked. I don't know yet, Jade admitted, but we're not giving up. Edward and Kendra will be back. Talia said, they'll think they've won. They haven't won anything yet, Jade said. Angela Hayes arrived later that morning, her car raising a cloud of dust on the gravel driveway. The older woman had been Jade's rock through this crisis. I've been making some calls, Angela announced. The local event venues have agreed to accommodate all of our displaced bookings at their cost, not ours. It won't bring in revenue, but at least we won't have to refund deposits we can't afford to lose. That's incredibly generous, Jade said. Angela nodded. Luna was well respected in this community. These folks worked with her for years. It was a small bright spot in an otherwise devastating situation, but it gave Jade the strength to do what needed to be done next. With hard hats and work gloves provided by the fire department, Jade, Angela, and the twins carefully entered the damaged structure. The fire chief had declared most of the barn stable enough to enter. We should start with Grandpa's plane, Jade decided. If those supports give way completely, it will be destroyed beyond repair. The controls and instruments are already damaged, Jake observed. The physical structure is what matters most, Jade explained. Your great-grandfather rebuilt this plane himself after the war. Working together, they began carefully removing smaller components from the aircraft, cataloging each piece and checking for damage. Most could be repaired or replaced, Jade thought, if only she had the funds to do so. Jake had climbed up to the cockpit, carefully extracting what remained. Mom, there's something weird here. What is it? Jade asked, looking up. This panel doesn't match the rest of the dashboard, Jake explained. Curious, Jade climbed the ladder they had positioned next to the aircraft. Jake was right. A small section of the instrument panel didn't match the weathered patina of the surrounding areas. It looked to have been installed more recently. Maybe it was repaired at some point, Jade suggested. But as she examined it more closely, she noticed something odd. Unlike the other panels, which were secured with visible screws, this one appeared to be mounted on a hinge of some kind. It's like a little door, Jake said. Jade felt along the panel and found a small, nearly invisible catch on the underside. When she pressed it, the panel swung open on well-oiled hinges, revealing a hidden compartment behind the dashboard. A secret hiding place, she breathed. Your great-grandfather was known for his love of hidden compartments. Inside the compartment was a metal box, about the size of a hardcover book, secured to the aircraft frame with leather straps. What is it? Talia called from below. Some kind of container, Jade replied, turning the box in her hands. The silver Luna's identifying markings. A small combination lock secured the lid. Any idea what the combination might be? Jake asked. Jade thought. Let's try your great-grandmother's birthday. She dialed in the 6 digits, month, day, year, but the lock remained secure. What about their anniversary? Talia suggested. Jade tried that combination as well, with no success. After several more attempts with significant family dates, she sat back, frustrated. Maybe we're overthinking this, she said finally. Grandpa James was a practical man. What would he use that he wouldn't forget? The plane serial number? Jake suggested. Too long. Jade shook her head. What about the date he got the plane? Angela called up. Jade looked down at her in surprise. Do you know when that was? June 1947, I believe. So, 61,947. Jade dialed in the numbers, and with a satisfying click, the lock released. Inside the box was a collection of small, leather-bound journals, 5 in total, each embossed with Luna Sterling's initials and a different year. Grandma Luna's diaries, Jade murmured. But why hide them in the airplane? Perhaps because they contained secrets she wanted to protect, Angela suggested. Jade brought the journals down the ladder, handling them as if they were priceless artifacts, which, in a way, they were. The family gathered around a salvage table near the barn entrance. The first entry sent a shock through Jade. April 3, 1979. I have done the unthinkable. After 20 years of marriage to James, I have betrayed him in the worst possible way. Thomas and I never meant for it to happen, but one moment of weakness has changed everything. James is away on business so often these days, and Thomas understands me in ways James never has. He listens when I speak of my dreams, treats my thoughts as valuable, not merely the musings of a bored housewife. But this cannot continue. The guilt is unbearable. Thomas? Jade looked up in confusion. Thomas Laurent, Angela said quietly. He was the architect who designed the renovations for the main house back in the late 70s. Jade continued reading, her heart racing as Luna's story unfolded across the pages. The brief affair had ended after only a few weeks, with Thomas returning to his firm in New York. Luna had confessed everything to James, who had been deeply hurt but eventually forgave her. Their marriage had survived, stronger for having weathered the crisis. But then came the entry that changed everything. December 18, 1979. The doctor confirmed it today. I am with a child at 41, a miracle and a curse wrapped together. James is overjoyed, believing this baby to be the son he has always wanted. But I alone know the devastating truth. This child cannot be his. James was away for the entire month when this baby was conceived. It can only be Thomas's child. I am trapped in a lie that will destroy my family if revealed. Yet living with this secret feels impossible. Jade's hands trembled as she turned the page, the implications beginning to dawn on her. The dates, the timeline. May 16, 1980. Our daughter was born today, Elaine Marie Sterling, 7 pounds, 4 ounces of perfection and heartache. James is besotted with her, his precious girl. He sees nothing of Thomas in her features, only what he wants to see, sterling eyes, sterling smile. I thank God daily for this mercy, that my sin remains hidden in plain sight. I will love this child with every fiber of my being, and perhaps that love will someday atone for the deception. Jade looked up at Angela, who was watching her with knowing eyes. Elaine Marie Sterling, Jade whispered. My mother. Angela nodded solemnly. I suspected, but Luna never confirmed it to me. But that means... Jade couldn't finish the sentence, the revelation too enormous to put into words. It means James Sterling wasn't your biological grandfather. Angela completed gently. And Edward and Kendra. Aren't my biological siblings? Jade said, the truth finally crystallizing. They're my half-siblings at most. If my mother was Thomas Laurent's daughter, then you are Luna's only biological grandchild with both Sterling and Laurent blood, Angela confirmed. The others are Sterling grandchildren only through James, not through Luna. The revelation was staggering. For 43 years, Luna had kept this secret, sharing it only with these hidden journals. Not even Jade's mother had known the truth about her parentage. Jade turned to the most recent journal, dated just a year before Luna's death. The entries detailed her grandmother's declining health, her reflections on life, and most importantly, her decision about the inheritance. March 4, 2021. Harrison Hartwell visited today to update my will. I have made the difficult decision to leave the entire property to Jade. She alone has shown the love for this land, for Luna's wing, for the legacy James and I built. Edward sees only dollar signs where history stands. Kendra views everything through the cold lens of legal advantage. But Jade, dear Jade, with her twins and her struggle and her unbreakable spirit, she deserves this chance. And though she doesn't know it, she is my only true grandchild by blood. Thomas Laurent's creativity lives on in her artistic spirit, his kindness in her heart. The Sterling name is hers by law, but the Sterling Laurent legacy is hers by right of blood. I know Edward and Kendra will be furious. They have always felt entitled to equal shares, though they have done nothing to earn such consideration. James would want me to divide things evenly, I suppose. But James is gone, and I alone know the truth that has burned in my heart for decades. This secret dies with me, unless circumstances arise where Jade needs to defend her inheritance. Then, and only then, may these journals be revealed. Jade closed the book, overwhelmed by the weight of her grandmother's confession. She knew they would fight the will, she said softly. But how could she know you'd find them? Talia asked. It seems like such a risk hiding them in the plane. Luna used to tell Jade stories about the airplane's secret compartments. Angela explained. I remember those stories. Jade nodded. She would say, when you need answers, look to the Silver Luna. So what does this mean for us? Jake asked. Does this change anything about Uncle Edward and Aunt Kendra trying to force us out? Legally, they've been contesting the will based on their rights as grandchildren. But if they aren't Luna's biological grandchildren, their claim is significantly weakened. Angela finished. DNA evidence would support these journals. But do we really want to expose all this? Talia asked. Great. Grandma kept this secret her whole life. Jade considered her daughter's question carefully. Revealing the truth would indeed unleash a family earthquake, exposing Luna's decades-old affair and potentially damaging many people's cherished memories. But Edward and Kendra had already declared war. Grandma Luna left these journals for a reason, Jade said finally. She wanted me to have this information if I needed to defend my inheritance. Jake picked up one of the journals, turning it thoughtfully in his hands. So what's our next move? First, we call Mr. Hartwell, Jade decided. He needs to see these journals and advise us on the legal implications. Then we need to secure DNA evidence to support the diary's claims. Luna kept locks of hair from all her children and grandchildren in her memory books, Angela offered. Those could potentially be used for testing. Good, Jade nodded. We'll need that. But we also have another problem, the property taxes. What property taxes? Talia asked, confused. I found a notice in Grandma's papers yesterday. There are substantial back taxes owed on the property from before I inherited it. If they're not paid within 30 days, the county can begin seizure proceedings. How much? Jake asked. Almost 140, zero. Jade replied grimly. That's why Edward mentioned foreclosure, Angela realized. He knew about the tax situation. They were planning to wait for the county to seize the property. Exactly, Jade confirmed. Between the insurance fraud, the deliberate destruction of Luna's wing, and now this tax situation, they thought they had me cornered. As the family discussed their next steps, none of them noticed the sleek black car that pulled up at the far end of the driveway, or the woman with a camera who took several photographs of them gathered among the wreckage of Luna's wing. The journals spread out before them. Kendra Wilson lowered her camera, a cold smile playing across her lips. So Jade had found something in the wreckage, something that had given her hope. How touching, and how futile. She started her car and drove away silently, already formulating the next phase of her plan. Harrison Hartwell's vintage Cadillac raised a cloud of dust as it pulled up to the Sterling ranch house the following morning. I came as soon as I could, he told Jade as she greeted him on the porch. Your message sounded urgent. It is, Jade confirmed, leading him inside to the dining room. We've discovered something that changes everything. For the next hour, Hartwell reviewed the journals in silence, his expression shifting from professional interest to shock and finally to thoughtful calculation. When he finally looked up, Jade could see that the experienced lawyer was genuinely stunned. In 45 years of practice, he said, I have never encountered this situation. Luna never gave me the slightest hint of this revelation. Do you believe it's true? Jade asked. Hartwell nodded slowly. Luna Sterling was many things, but she was never a fabulist. If she documented this so carefully, with such obvious pain and reflection, I have no doubt of its authenticity. The question is, how do we proceed? That's why I called you, Jade said. Edward and Kendra have already demonstrated they'll stop at nothing to get this property. About those taxes, Hartwell frowned. I was under the impression that the matter had been resolved before Luna's passing. Apparently not, Jade replied. The county says we owe nearly 140, zero, due within the month. This doesn't look right. Luna was meticulous about her finances. I need to look into this further. In the meantime, Jade continued, we need to know if these journals and supporting DNA evidence would be enough to counter Edward and Kendra's legal challenge to the will. It's complicated, Hartwell admitted. From a strictly legal perspective, Edward and Kendra were raised as James Sterling's grandchildren. They bear his name legally, and he accepted them as his descendants. Courts generally respect such established familial relationships, regardless of biological truth. Jade's heart sank. So the journals won't help? I didn't say that, Hartwell corrected. While the journals alone might not invalidate their legal standing as family members, they would significantly undermine their claim of undue influence. Luna's writings make it abundantly clear that her decision to leave everything to you was carefully considered, based on both your demonstrated care for the property and your unique biological connection to her. But if Edward and Kendra aren't Luna's biological grandchildren, doesn't that strengthen my claim? It complicates matters, Hartwell explained. The court would have to weigh biology against established family relationships. More importantly, though, the journals provide irrefutable evidence of Luna's mental competence and her specific reasons for the inheritance decision. That alone would likely defeat a challenge based on undue influence. So, what do we do next? Jade asked. First, we secure these journals properly, Hartwell decided. I'll have them professionally photographed and transcribed, with the originals placed in a secure location. Second, we should proceed with DNA testing to confirm the journal's claims, discreetly for now. Third, I need to investigate this tax notice. As they discussed strategy, Jake and Talia entered the dining room, followed by a young woman Jade didn't recognize. She appeared to be in her early 30s. Mom, this is Meredith Zhao, Talia introduced her. She's with Montana Legal Aid. We found her information online last night and contacted her this morning. I apologize for the intrusion, Meredith said, extending her hand to Jade. Your daughter was quite persuasive about the urgency of your situation. She mentioned insurance fraud and deliberate property damage. Jade shot a surprised look at her daughter, who shrugged. We need all the help we can get. Harrison Hartwell rose to his feet, his initial expression of concern giving way to thoughtful assessment. Montana Legal Aid. I'm impressed by your response time, Ms. Zhao. Call me Meredith, she replied, and we prioritize cases involving potential homeowner displacement. For the next hour, the two lawyers and the family reviewed the entire situation: the inheritance, Edward and Kendra's escalating efforts to force Jade out, the deliberate destruction of Luna's wing, the insurance manipulation, and now the discovery of the journals. The insurance fraud is the clearest legal violation, Meredith noted, typing rapidly on her laptop. Ms. Wilson's sister had no authority to make changes to the policy without the property owner's consent. That's actionable. Proving deliberate damage to the barn will be more challenging, Hartwell cautioned. Edward will claim it was simply a party that got out of hand. Maybe not, Jake spoke up, pulling out his phone. I recorded some of what happened, including Uncle Edward telling those guys to remove the support beams. Jade looked at her son in surprise. You recorded that? Jake nodded. I didn't trust them from the beginning. Smart kid, Meredith said approvingly. This is extremely helpful. It clearly shows intent to damage the property. There's something else, Talia added, pulling up social media on her tablet. Uncle Edward posted about the party barn rager days before it happened. And look at these DMs he sent to friends. She scrolled through messages where Edward explicitly invited people to help destroy the old barn and party like it's going to collapse, because it will. Where did you get these? Jade asked, astonished. His Instagram is public, Talia explained, and one of his friends who got the DMs felt bad about what happened and forwarded them to me this morning after seeing my post about the damage. Meredith and Hartwell exchanged impressed glances. With this evidence, Meredith said, we could potentially file for an emergency injunction preventing Edward and Kendra from taking any further action against the property while we pursue charges for insurance fraud, criminal property damage, and possibly conspiracy. What about the tax issue? Jade asked. Hartwell closed his portfolio decisively. Leave that to me. I suspect there's more to this tax notice than meets the eye. In the meantime, Ms. Zhao, would you be willing to take the lead on the insurance and property damage matters? I'd be honored to work with you, Mr. Hartwell, Meredith agreed. And please, call me Meredith. Harrison, he replied with a small bow. I believe we may make a formidable team. As the lawyers continued discussing strategy, Jade stepped outside onto the porch, needing a moment to process everything. The last few days had been a whirlwind of devastating losses and surprising discoveries. She gazed across the property toward Luna's wing, its damaged silhouette, a painful reminder of Edward and Kendra's betrayal. Talia joined her mother on the porch. Are you okay, Mom? I'm hanging in there. It's a lot to process. Do you think we can save this place? Talia asked. I don't know, Jade admitted. The legal path looks promising, but the financial reality is still daunting. Even if we win against Edward and Kendra, we'll still need to find $800, zero for repairs, and $140, zero for taxes. Maybe not, Jake said. Mom, there's something else in Grandma Luna's journals. Something we missed yesterday. He handed Jade the most recent journal, open to entries from just months before Luna's death. January 17, 2022. I fear Edward and Kendra will not accept my decision gracefully. They have grown entitled over the years, expecting equal shares regardless of their contribution or care for this land. I have taken precautions. The Swiss account remains untouched, with sufficient funds to cover any emergency that might arise after my passing. Jade will find the details in the letter I've left with the lawyers at Silverman Cohen in Zurich. The Sterling family has maintained this relationship for 3 generations, and they have served us well. Jade looked up in confusion. Swiss account? Keep reading, Jake urged. February 3, 2022. Harrison visited today. We discussed the tax dispute with the county. He assures me our appeal is strong, but these matters can drag on for years. I've set aside funds specifically for this purpose in the Montana United Bank, under the Crescent Trust. The access information is with the material I've left for Jade in the Silver Luna's compartment. I pray she never needs to use these resources, but I've lived long enough to know that preparation for the worst is never wasted effort. The Crescent Trust, Jade breathed. I remember Grandma mentioning that once. There's more. Jake pointed to another entry. March 21, 2022. My health is failing faster than I expected. I've made the final arrangements for Jade's protection. The collection will be sufficient if she ever needs to rebuild or defend the property. James would understand, I think. He loved this land as much as I did, though in different ways. The Sterling Laurent legacy belongs in Jade's hands, not with those who would sell it to the highest bidder. The collection? Jade wondered aloud. I think I know, Angela said, stepping onto the porch. Luna's art collection. She spent decades acquiring works by significant Western artists. Most people assumed they were reproductive prints because she never made a fuss about them, but several are valuable originals. She kept detailed provenance documentation in her safe. Where is this safe? Jade asked. In her bedroom closet, Angela replied. Inside the house, Harrison Hartwell was ending a phone call as Jade and the others returned. His expression was triumphant. I've just spoken with the county tax assessor's office, he announced. As I suspected, something was amiss with that notice. The appeal Luna filed was actually approved 3 months ago, reducing the property's tax assessment significantly. The back taxes owed are actually just under 18,000, not 140,000. But the notice, Jade began, was falsified, Hartwell finished grimly. Someone created a convincing forgery of an official county document. I've already spoken with the sheriff about this, not your brother's friend Daniels, but Sheriff Martinez at the county level. Edward and Kendra, Jade said, the pieces falling into place. It appears so, Hartwell agreed, and that changes the legal landscape considerably. Forgery of government documents elevates this from a family dispute to criminal fraud. Meredith looked up from her laptop. I've been reviewing the evidence of insurance fraud as well. The insurance company has confirmed that Kendra Wilson identified herself as an authorized representative of the property owner when she called to update the policy information. That's another clear instance of fraud. So what happens now? Jade asked. Now, Hartwell said with quiet confidence, we go on the offensive. Over the next week, events moved at a dizzying pace. Meredith filed emergency injunctions preventing Edward and Kendra from approaching the property while the fraud and property damage investigations proceeded. Harrison Hartwell located Luna's letter at the Swiss law firm, confirming the existence of an account with nearly 300,000 set aside specifically for the protection of the Sterling legacy. The Crescent Trust at Montana United Bank held another 100,000 designated for tax disputes. And Luna's art collection, professionally appraised at Hartwell's insistence, was valued at over 450,000. DNA testing confirmed what the journals had revealed. Jade was indeed Luna's biological grandchild through both bloodlines, while Edward and Kendra were related to Luna only through marriage, not biology. But the most surprising development came from an unexpected quarter. As word of the Party Barn disaster spread through the community, people began to respond. It started with a Facebook post from the local florist, who had worked hundreds of weddings at Luna's wing over the years. The Sterling Barn isn't just a venue, it's part of our community's heart. Luna Sterling gave many of us our start in business, offering reduced rates to local vendors and mentoring young entrepreneurs. Now her granddaughter Jade needs our help. Who's with me? The post went viral within the small community. By the end of the day, a Save Luna's Wing group had formed. By the end of the week, they had organized a fundraiser at the local VFW hall. Contractors offered discounted services for the rebuilding. Artisans volunteered to recreate damaged fixtures. Former brides and grooms whose weddings had taken place at Luna's wing shared memories and donations. Most surprising of all was the transformation in Jake and Talia. The twins, who had been so resistant to rural life just weeks earlier, had become champions of the restoration effort. Jake, with his newfound interest in construction, organized a group of local teenagers to help with cleanup and basic repairs under professional supervision. Talia, leveraging her social media skills, created a GoFundMe campaign that quickly spread beyond the local community. The Sterling Barn Restoration Project became a minor internet sensation, with Talia's before and after photos and Jake's progress videos drawing surprising support. A weekend news segment on a Billings television station brought even more attention, portraying the story as a classic tale of small-town resilience against corporate greed. Edward and Kendra, meanwhile, found themselves in increasingly dire straits. The fraud investigations had led to professional consequences. Edward's real estate license was suspended pending the outcome of the criminal inquiry, and Kendra's law firm had placed her on administrative leave after clients began expressing concerns about her ethics. Their plan to acquire the property at a tax auction had collapsed with the exposure of the fraudulent tax notice. 3 weeks after the Party Barn disaster, Jade sat in Harrison Hartwell's office in town, reviewing the latest developments in their legal counterattack. Meredith Zhao joined them via video call. The district attorney has agreed to pursue criminal charges for insurance fraud, document forgery, and criminal property damage, Meredith reported. They're particularly interested in the falsified tax document, as that constitutes impersonation of county officials. What kind of penalties are we looking at? Jade asked. Potentially significant, Hartwell replied. Insurance fraud alone carries a penalty of up to 10 years in Montana. The document forgery is a Class C felony. And the property damage, given the dollar amount, is also felony level. I'm not sure I want to see them go to prison, Jade admitted. There might be an alternative, Meredith suggested. If Edward and Kendra were willing to make restitution and accept responsibility, the DA might consider a plea arrangement that includes probation rather than incarceration. Restitution? Jade asked. Financial compensation for the damage they caused, Hartwell explained. They'd never agree to that, Jade said. Edward's business is failing, and Kendra's divorce left her financially stretched. They wanted the property precisely because they needed money. Actually, Meredith interjected, we've received an interesting communication from Edward's attorney this morning. Before she could elaborate, Hartwell's assistant knocked and entered the office. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Sheriff Martinez is here. The county sheriff entered, his expression grave. Ms. Wilson, Mr. Hartwell, we've just executed search warrants at both Edward and Kendra Wilson's residences. I thought you should know what we found. Among other evidence of fraud related to this case, we discovered these documents in Kendra Wilson's home office. Hartwell opened the file and examined the contents, his eyebrows rising in surprise. These appear to be forgeries of Luna Sterling's signature on various financial documents, loan applications, property transfers. They were preparing to forge Grandma Luna's signature on financial documents? Jade asked, appalled. It appears so, Sheriff Martinez confirmed. That changes things considerably, Hartwell said. This suggests the fraud was not just an impulsive reaction to the inheritance decision, but a long-term criminal conspiracy. There's more, the sheriff continued. We found evidence that Edward Wilson has significant gambling debts to some very dangerous people. His financial situation is far worse than we initially understood, and Ms. Kendra Wilson appears to have misappropriated client funds from her law firm. Jade sat back, stunned by these revelations. Her siblings' betrayal went far deeper than she had imagined. What happens now, she asked. The DA will add these new charges to the existing case, Sheriff Martinez explained. After the sheriff departed, Jade sat in silence, processing this latest development. Hartwell gave her a moment before speaking. I understand this is difficult, Jade. Despite everything, they are still your family. Are they? They tried to destroy my home, my livelihood, my future, and my children's future. They were willing to commit multiple felonies to get what they wanted. Whatever you decide about your relationship with Edward and Kendra going forward, the legal process will continue. They made their choices, and now they must face the consequences. Meredith, still on the video call, cleared her throat. There is one piece of good news. The community fundraising effort has now reached 215,000. Combined with Luna's contingency funds and the potential sale of some of the art collection, you'll have enough to fully restore Luna's wing and stabilize the property's finances. Jade felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. I still can't believe how the community has rallied around us. Most of these people barely know me. They knew Luna, Hartwell reminded her, and they see her in you, the same determination, the same care for the land and its legacy. As Jade drove home from Hartwell's office, her mind was still reeling from the day's revelations. The road wound through golden hayfields and stands of aspen, the familiar landscape somehow different now that she understood her true connection to it. Approaching the ranch, she could see activity around Luna's wing. A construction crane was carefully removing damaged sections of the roof, while a team of workers secured the remaining structure. Jake was there, she knew, learning from the professionals, asking questions, understanding how the historic barn had been built and how it could be saved. Near the main house, Talia sat on the porch with Angela, laptops open, managing the social media campaign and coordinating volunteer efforts. As Jade parked and walked toward the house, she noticed an unfamiliar truck in the driveway. A man stood talking with Talia and Angela, gesturing toward Luna's wing with animated enthusiasm. "Mom," Talia called as Jade approached. "This is Daniel Laurent. He's an architect from New York, and you're not going to believe this. He's Thomas Laurent's grandson." Jade froze, staring at the stranger with new eyes. He appeared to be in his early 50s with features that somehow seemed vaguely familiar despite never having met. "Mr. Laurent," she finally managed. "This is unexpected. Please, call me Daniel," he replied, extending his hand. "And I'm just as surprised as you are. I saw your daughter's restoration campaign online and recognized Luna's wing immediately. My grandfather kept photographs of this place in his study until the day he died. He never explained why, but he always spoke of Montana with a special fondness." "Did he know?" Jade wondered aloud. "About my mother?" Daniel's expression shifted to one of confusion. "Your mother? I'm not sure I follow." Jade hesitated, unsure how much to reveal to this stranger who might, in fact, be her cousin. "It's a complicated family story. Perhaps we should talk privately." As they walked toward the house, Talia called after them. "Daniel's an expert in historical restoration. He's offered to consult on Luna's wing for free." Inside, over coffee at the kitchen table where so many family discussions had taken place, Jade carefully explained what she had discovered in Luna's journals. Daniel listened in astonished silence, occasionally asking questions but mostly absorbing this unexpected revelation about his grandfather's past. "This is extraordinary," he said finally. "I always sensed there was something my grandfather wasn't telling us about his time in Montana." "So you didn't know?" Jade confirmed. "About the relationship or about my mother?" Daniel shook his head. "Not a word. But it explains so much. The way he would get quiet whenever Montana was mentioned. His collection of books about ranching and Western architecture, despite having spent most of his career designing urban buildings. It's strange to think that my grandfather's blood runs in your veins. That makes us, what? Second cousins? I suppose it does," Jade agreed, still processing this unexpected connection. "Family has a way of finding itself," Daniel mused. "I came here on professional curiosity, drawn by a beautiful historic barn that needed saving. Instead, I found relatives I never knew existed." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of Jade's phone. It was Harrison Hartwell. "Edward and Kendra have been arrested," he informed her. "They're being processed now, but there's a development you should be aware of. Edward is claiming he has evidence that could undermine our case, specifically regarding the DNA findings." "What kind of evidence?" Jade asked. "He hasn't specified," Hartwell replied. "It may be a bluff, a desperate attempt to delay proceedings." After ending the call, Jade explained the situation to Daniel, who had become an unexpected confidant in the space of an afternoon. "Do you think he really has something that could challenge the DNA results?" Daniel asked. "I don't see how," Jade said. "The testing was conclusive, unless," a terrible thought occurred to her, "unless they found a way to tamper with the samples. Is that possible?" Daniel looked concerned. "I don't know," Jade admitted. As the sun began to set over the mountains, casting long shadows across the property, Jade stood on the porch with Daniel, watching the construction crew finishing up for the day at Luna's wing. "Whatever evidence Edward claims to have," Daniel said quietly, "it doesn't change who you are or your connection to this land. Thank you for that. And thank you for offering your expertise with the restoration. It means more than you know." "I think my grandfather would have wanted me to help," Daniel replied. "To contribute in some small way to preserving this place that clearly meant so much to him." As Daniel departed with promises to return the next day with preliminary restoration plans, Jade remained on the porch, watching the last light fade from the mountains. 2 weeks later, Luna's wing was well on its way to recovery. The damaged eastern wall had been rebuilt with careful attention to historical detail. The roof was nearly complete, and the interior restoration had begun. The legal proceedings against Edward and Kendra were advancing steadily. Both had been released on bail but were under strict orders to stay away from the Sterling property. The evidence against them was substantial. From the video Jake had captured of Edward directing the destruction of support beams to the forged documents found in Kendra's home office, Edward's claimed evidence against the DNA findings had yet to materialize, leading Harrison Hartwell to believe it was indeed a desperate bluff. Still, Jade remained wary. Her siblings had proven themselves capable of elaborate deceptions. On a clear September morning, Jade stood inside Luna's wing, watching as workers carefully repositioned the Silver Luna aircraft, which had been removed for restoration after the disaster. It looks better than before, Talia observed, joining her mother. More. Alive somehow. Jade nodded in agreement. The aircraft did seem to have a renewed presence, its silver surface catching the sunlight streaming through the new skylights Daniel had incorporated into the restored roof. Daniel says we can start booking events again by November, Talia continued excitedly. Just in time for the holiday season. That's wonderful. Jade smiled. Your great-grandmother would be so proud of what you've accomplished. What we've accomplished, Talia corrected. The moment was interrupted by Jake rushing into the barn, his expression urgent. Mom, Meredith just called. Edward and Kendra are on their way here with some lawyer we don't know. They have a court order of some kind. Jade's stomach tightened with anxiety. Did she say what kind of order? Jake shook his head. Just that we should wait for her before discussing anything with them. Alert the construction crew, Jade instructed, her voice calm despite her racing heart. No one is to leave, but everyone should stay calm and keep working. Whatever this is, we'll handle it professionally. Within 20 minutes, 2 vehicles pulled into the driveway. Edward's black Mercedes SUV and an unfamiliar luxury sedan. From the latter emerged a tall, sharp-featured man in an expensive suit, carrying a leather briefcase that practically screamed, high-priced attorney. Edward and Kendra approached the main house with their lawyer, their expressions a mixture of defiance and smug satisfaction. Jade met them on the porch, maintaining the boundary of her home. You're violating the terms of your bail by being here, she reminded them calmly. We have a court order, Kendra replied, nodding to their attorney. Ms. Wilson, I'm Jonathan Drake of Drake, Mercer, Powell. The lawyer introduced himself with practiced smoothness. I represent your siblings in this matter. This is a temporary restraining order preventing you from proceeding with any further DNA testing or introducing existing DNA evidence in the ongoing legal proceedings regarding your grandmother's estate. Jade accepted the probant, I ep C my hers of Lavson the Sev, 200 verbal R, 40 Praven, document, scanning it quickly. On what grounds? The existing DNA evidence was collected improperly, Drake explained. Hair samples from your grandmother's memory books do not constitute properly obtained specimens for legal DNA comparison. Furthermore, we have reason to believe the samples may have been contaminated or tampered with. That's absurd, Jade countered. The testing was done by an accredited laboratory following all proper protocols. Edward smirked. Perhaps, but we've also filed a motion challenging the admissibility of Luna's journals as evidence. Our grandmother documented her experiences truthfully, Jade maintained. A matter of opinion, Kendra replied coldly. The court will have to determine whether the emotional ramblings of an elderly woman constitute admissible evidence in a legal proceeding. Jade was about to respond when another vehicle pulled into the driveway. Meredith Zhao's modest sedan. The young lawyer emerged quickly, briefcase in hand, her expression determined. I see I'm just in time, she remarked, joining Jade on the porch. Mr. Drake, I presume? I'm Meredith Zhao, representing Ms. Wilson. Drake's eyebrows rose slightly, perhaps surprised by Meredith's youth or perhaps by her confident demeanor. Ms. Zhao, I was just explaining to your client the restrictions imposed by this temporary order. Meredith took the document from Jade, reviewing it carefully. This only addresses the DNA evidence and journals. It doesn't prevent the criminal proceedings related to fraud and property damage from moving forward. Those are separate matters, Drake acknowledged. We're focused on the inheritance dispute. Interesting strategy, Meredith remarked, particularly given that your clients are facing multiple felony charges that could result in significant prison time. We're prepared to discuss a comprehensive settlement, Drake revealed, glancing at Edward and Kendra, who nodded in agreement. We're listening, Meredith said cautiously. Drake outlined their proposal. Edward and Kendra would make restitution for the damage to Luna's wing, using funds from the sale of their respective properties. In exchange, Jade would support reduced charges in the criminal case and agree to sell the ranch, splitting the proceeds 3 ways as Luna would have wanted. That's your idea of a settlement? Jade asked incredulously. It's a reasonable compromise, Edward insisted. You destroyed a historic structure that our grandmother lovingly preserved. You manipulated insurance coverage to leave me unprotected. You created fraudulent tax documents to try to force foreclosure. And now you expect me to consider your proposal. Before the conversation could escalate further, another vehicle appeared, Harrison Hartwell's vintage Cadillac. The elderly attorney emerged with surprising agility, accompanied by Sheriff Martinez. I hope we're not too late for this impromptu negotiation. Not at all, Meredith assured him. Mr. Drake was just explaining his client's settlement proposal. It's quite ambitious. Hartwell reviewed the restraining order and listened as Meredith summarized the proposed settlement. An interesting approach, he finally commented. However, there's a development you should be aware of before discussions proceed further. He nodded to Sheriff Martinez, who stepped forward. "This morning, we executed another search warrant at the residence of one Richard Kensington," the sheriff announced. Mr. Kensington was a business associate of Edward Wilson and apparently held certain materials for safekeeping. Among those materials, we found this. He produced an evidence bag containing what appeared to be a small vial of liquid and several cotton swabs. "A DNA collection kit," Sheriff Martinez explained, along with detailed notes on how to access the laboratory where the original DNA testing was performed. "It appears Mr. Wilson was planning to tamper with or substitute the original samples." Edward's face drained of color. "That's ridiculous. I've never seen that before." "Mr. Kensington has provided a full statement," the sheriff continued implacably, "including details of your plan to compromise the DNA evidence." Kendra turned on her brother furiously. "You involved Richard in this? After I specifically told you not to trust him?" "He offered to help," Edward shot back. "What was I supposed to do?" Their lawyer cleared his throat loudly. "I believe we should continue this discussion in private." "I agree," Hartwell said smoothly. "Perhaps at my office? 3 o'clock this afternoon?" Drake nodded stiffly, gathering his composure. 3 o'clock is acceptable." As the lawyers exchanged contact information, Edward moved closer to Jade, his voice low and urgent. "This isn't over, Jade. You may have won this round, but I still have one card left to play." "More threats?" Jade sighed. "This isn't a threat," he insisted. "It's a fact. There's something you don't know, something not even in Luna's precious journals." Before Jade could respond, Sheriff Martinez approached. "Mr. Wilson, I need to remind you that the terms of your bail prohibit direct contact with the victim." After they departed, Jade turned to Harrison Hartwell and Meredith Zhao. "What do you make of Edward's latest claim? Another bluff?" "Most likely," Hartwell replied. "He's running out of options." "Still, we should prepare for any possibility," Meredith advised. "Is there anything that could have been in Luna's possession that might impact the case?" Jade considered the question carefully. "I've been through her personal effects thoroughly. If there was something significant, I believe I would have found it. Unless it wasn't here on the property," Angela Hayes suggested, joining them on the porch. She had been observing the confrontation from inside the house. "Luna kept a safe deposit box at Montana United Bank. I'm not sure if you've checked that yet." Jade looked surprised. "No, I haven't." "Mr. Hartwell, was there a key listed in the estate inventory?" Hartwell frowned thoughtfully. "Not that I recall, but there was a notation about personal effects at the bank." "I think we should check that safe deposit box immediately," Meredith suggested. 2 hours later, Jade stood in a private room at Montana United Bank, staring at the contents of her grandmother's safe deposit box. Inside was a single sealed envelope with Jade's name written in Luna's elegant script, along with a small wooden box inlaid with mother of pearl in a moon phase pattern. With trembling fingers, Jade opened the envelope first. Inside was a letter dated just 1 week before Luna's death. "My dearest Jade, if you are reading this, then circumstances have forced you to search more deeply into our family's complicated history. I had hoped the journals would be sufficient, but I always knew that Edward and Kendra might go to extraordinary lengths to challenge your inheritance. The enclosed box contains the final piece of our family puzzle, one I could not bring myself to document even in my private journals. It relates not to your mother's parentage, which the journals explain truthfully, but to Edward and Kendra's true place in our family. James was not their biological grandfather. When my daughter Margaret married Robert Wilson, I had concerns about him that I could not fully articulate. There was something calculating in his manner, something that reminded me too much of my own mistake with Thomas Laurent. My fears were realized when, 3 years into their marriage, I discovered Robert was having an affair with his colleague, Elizabeth Jenkins. Unlike James, who forgave my indiscretion, Margaret never learned of Robert's betrayal. I confronted him privately, and he swore it had ended. I believed him, or wanted to believe him. It was only years later, after both Edward and Kendra were born, that I discovered the truth. Robert had maintained his relationship with Elizabeth throughout the marriage. More shocking still, genetic testing conducted discreetly when Edward needed a transfusion at age 5, revealed that neither Edward nor Kendra were biologically related to our family. They are Elizabeth Jenkins' children, not Margaret's. Robert Wilson, for reasons I can only speculate about, passed these children off as his and Margaret's. Perhaps Elizabeth couldn't keep them. Perhaps it was his twisted way of maintaining both relationships. Margaret, who had been told she had fertility issues, accepted these miracle babies without question. I've carried this secret for decades, protecting Margaret from a truth that would have devastated her. Even after her passing, I could not bring myself to expose this deception and taint her memory of her beloved children. But now, with Edward and Kendra challenging your rightful inheritance with such vehemence, I feel I must equip you with the full truth. The box contains the original genetic testing results and additional documentation I've gathered over the years. Use this information only if absolutely necessary. It will destroy what remains of our family bonds, but it will ensure that the Sterling legacy remains with a true Sterling. You, my dear Jade, my only biological grandchild. With eternal love, Luna Jade sat heavily in the bank's chair, the letter trembling in her hands. This revelation was far more explosive than anything she had imagined. If true, and she had no reason to doubt her grandmother's word, it meant that Edward and Kendra had no biological connection to the Sterling family at all. The wooden box contained exactly what Luna had described. Medical records from a hospital in Billings dated 33 years ago, showing the blood type incompatibility that had triggered further testing, and the resulting genetic analysis proving that Edward could not be biologically related to the Sterling family. Similar documentation existed for Kendra. Is everything all right? The bank manager asked, noticing Jade's distress. Yes, Jade managed. Just unexpected family matters. Could I have a moment alone, please? After the manager departed, Jade sat in silence considering her options. The meeting with Edward, Kendra, and their respective lawyers was scheduled for less than an hour from now. This evidence would give her complete leverage, not just legal, but emotional as well. But at what cost? Despite everything they had done, could Jade bring herself to destroy their understanding of who they were? To reveal that their entire family identity was based on a lie? The ethical dilemma weighed heavily as she drove to Harrison Hartwell's office, the wooden box secure in her purse. She had called ahead to request a private meeting with her lawyers before the negotiation began, explaining only that she had discovered significant new information. Hartwell and Meredith listened in stunned silence as Jade explained what she had found. She showed them the letter and the contents of the box, watching their expressions shift from professional interest to genuine shock. "This is extraordinary," Hartwell murmured finally. If authenticated, this evidence would completely invalidate any claim Edward and Kendra might make to the Sterling estate. "It's the ultimate trump card," Meredith agreed. Jade nodded slowly. "Legally, yes, but morally, I'm struggling. This information wouldn't just defeat their claim to the property, it would destroy their entire sense of identity. Everything they believe about themselves and their family would be exposed as a lie." "They tried to destroy your home," Meredith reminded her gently. "I know," Jade acknowledged. "It's your decision," Hartwell said quietly. "We can proceed without this evidence if you prefer." Before Jade could respond, Hartwell's assistant announced that Edward, Kendra, and their attorney had arrived. The conference room in Hartwell's office felt unnaturally tense as the parties assembled around the polished oak table. Edward and Kendra sat stiffly beside their attorney. "Thank you all for coming," Hartwell began formally. "I understand Mr. Drake has a revised settlement proposal to present." Drake cleared his throat. "Yes. In light of recent developments, my clients are prepared to offer more favorable terms." He outlined a new proposal. Edward and Kendra would make full restitution for the damage to Luna's wing, plead guilty to reduced charges of property damage, avoiding the more serious fraud charges, and accept a 20% share each of the property's value if Jade decided to sell in the future. Rather than demanding an immediate sale in equal thirds, this still presumes some entitlement to the property, Meredith observed when he finished. "On what basis do your clients believe they deserve any share at all, given the evidence against them?" "Family connection," Drake replied smoothly. Jade felt the weight of the wooden box in her purse, pressing against her leg like a physical manifestation of her moral dilemma. With a single revelation, she could end this negotiation instantly, crushing Edward and Kendra's claims along with their understanding of their place in the world. Edward must have sensed her internal conflict. "Before you respond, Jade, remember what I said earlier. I have information that changes everything. Information about who really owns the Sterling property." "Another bluff, Mr. Wilson?" Hartwell asked mildly. "Hardly," Edward replied, nodding to Drake, who produced a document from his briefcase. "We've discovered that the original Sterling homestead claim from 1891 was filed under disputed circumstances. The land was previously occupied by the Laurent family, who had an unregistered claim dating back to 1878. Jade froze. Laurent, the same name as her biological grandfather. "The Laurents were forced off the property through questionable legal maneuvers," Edward continued, clearly relishing Jade's surprise. "The Sterling family fortune was built on essentially stolen land. I wonder how your new friend Daniel Laurent would feel about that." Jade looked at her brother, for despite everything, that's how she still thought of him, and saw the desperate calculation in his eyes. In that moment, clarity washed over her. This wasn't about property or money anymore. It was about truth, about facing reality rather than clinging to comfortable fictions. Edward and Kendra had built their entire case on deception, forged documents, manipulated insurance, falsified tax notices. Now Edward was attempting one final deception, trying to create doubt where none should exist. Jade reached into her purse and placed Luna's wooden box on the table. "Edward, Kendra," she said quietly, "before we go any further, there's something you need to know. Something Grandma Luna kept hidden to protect you, but which I can no longer withhold in good conscience." She opened the box and removed Luna's letter, but did not yet hand it over. "This will be painful for both of you, and I want you to know that despite everything that's happened, I'm truly sorry to be the one to reveal it." Edward's confident expression faltered. "What are you talking about?" "The truth about your place in the Sterling family," Jade replied gently. She slid the letter across the table. "This is from Grandma Luna." "This can't be true," Kendra whispered, looking up with shock evident in her eyes. "We can't be. We're Sterlings. We've always been Sterlings." "The medical records are in the box," Jade said softly. "Grandma Luna kept everything. The blood type analysis, the genetic testing." Edward snatched the letter, reading it again as if searching for some loophole, some indication that it might be false. "She's lying," he insisted. "Why would she?" Jade asked gently. "The journals already explained why she left the property to me. This goes far beyond inheritance, Edward." Drake, who had been reading the medical documents with increasing alarm, cleared his throat. "I believe we should take a short recess. My clients need time to process this information." "Of course," Hartwell agreed. As Edward and Kendra left the conference room with their lawyer, Jade felt a complex mixture of emotions. There was no satisfaction in their obvious distress, only a profound sadness for the pain this revelation was causing. "Are you all right?" Meredith asked. "I think so," Jade replied. "It was the right decision," Hartwell assured her. When Edward and Kendra returned 30 minutes later, they were visibly transformed. The aggressive confidence, the entitled certainty that had characterized their previous interactions was gone, replaced by a shell-shocked vulnerability that made them seem younger, more human. "We'd like to withdraw our challenge to the will," Kendra said formally, "and we're prepared to accept full responsibility for the damage to Luna's wing, with restitution to be paid from the sale of our personal assets. We'll also plead guilty to the reduced charges," Edward added. Jade studied them carefully. "I appreciate that, but I'm more concerned about what this revelation means for you personally." "Why do you care?" Edward asked. "Because despite everything, we were raised as family," Jade replied simply. The settlement was finalized within the hour. Edward and Kendra would pay restitution, plead guilty to reduced charges resulting in probation rather than prison time, and relinquish all claims to the Sterling property. In return, Jade agreed not to publicly reveal the truth about their parentage and to provide them with copies of all family records that might help them understand their biological origins, should they wish to explore that path. As they prepared to leave, Kendra paused by Jade's chair. "For what it's worth, I am sorry. About the barn, the insurance, all of it. I got caught up in what I thought I deserved, what I thought was my birthright. Now, I don't even know who I am anymore." "You're still Kendra," Jade said gently. "Still the same person you were yesterday, with the same talents and abilities. Your DNA doesn't define you." "Maybe not," Kendra acknowledged, "but it's going to take time to figure out what does." Edward was waiting by the door, his expression still dazed. "The Laurent land claim," he said as Jade approached. "It wasn't real. Just something I made up after researching the name when you mentioned your connection to Daniel. I thought I could use it to create doubt." "I know," Jade said. "I don't know how to move forward from here," Edward confessed. "One day at a time," Jade suggested. "And if you ever want to talk, really talk, not scheme or manipulate, I'll be there." As Edward and Kendra departed, Jade felt an unexpected sense of peace. The battle for Sterling Ranch was over, but perhaps something more important had been preserved, the possibility, however distant, of genuine reconciliation in the future. 3 months later, Luna's Wing reopened with a community celebration that doubled as a fundraiser for local small businesses. The restored barn gleamed in the winter sunlight, its structure stronger than before, its history preserved while incorporating thoughtful, modern touches designed by Daniel Laurent. The Silver Luna aircraft once again held pride of place, suspended from the reinforced beams, watching over the gathered crowd. Jade had decided to keep the secret compartment, though it now contained a new journal, her own record of the journey from inheritance to destruction to rebirth. Jake and Talia moved through the celebration with confidence, no longer reluctant transplants but integral members of the community. Jake had discovered a passion for historical construction techniques and was already talking about architecture programs for college. Talia had leveraged her successful social media campaign into a small business, helping local vendors build their online presence. As Jade watched her children flourish, she felt her grandmother's presence. Luna Sterling had known exactly what she was doing when she left the property to Jade. It wasn't just about preserving a barn or maintaining family ownership of the land. It was about creating a legacy of truth, resilience, and integrity that would shape generations to come. As the celebration wound down, Jade stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The Montana winter twilight was settling over the ranch, painting the snow-covered fields in shades of blue and purple. Her phone rang, breaking the peaceful moment. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar New York number. "Hello?" Jade answered. "Mrs. Martinez?" a formal voice inquired. "This is Jeffrey Winters from the law firm of Winters, Black, Associates. I'm calling about your late husband's estate." Jade frowned in confusion. "I think you have the wrong number. My ex-husband isn't deceased. We've been divorced for 5 years." There was a pause on the other end. "This is Jade Martinez, formerly Jade Wilson, correct?" "Yes." Jade confirmed, a strange feeling of unease growing. "Then I'm afraid there's been some confusion," the lawyer replied. "According to our records, Ricardo Martinez passed away 6 weeks ago in Venezuela. I'm calling regarding the $2.3 million he left in his will to his wife, Jade Martinez." Jade's mind raced. Ricardo dead? And leaving her millions? It made no sense. There must be a mistake. Ricardo and I divorced years ago, and he certainly didn't have that kind of money. He could barely make child support payments. "That's where matters become complicated, Mrs. Martinez," the lawyer explained. "It appears Mr. Martinez had several undisclosed assets, and possibly several undisclosed marriages as well. We currently have 3 other women claiming to be his legal widow." Jade stood frozen on the porch, snowflakes beginning to fall around her as the implications of this new revelation sank in. Just when she thought her life had finally found stability, just when Luna's wing had been restored and the future secured, a new mystery had emerged from her past. Ricardo Martinez, the man she had once loved, the father of her children, had apparently been living a complex double life, perhaps multiple lives, accumulating wealth while claiming poverty, and possibly maintaining several families simultaneously. As Jade ended the call with a promise to contact the lawyer again the following day, she looked back at Luna's wing, glowing with warmth and light against the gathering darkness. Inside were her children, her friends, her community, the true wealth in her life. Whatever Ricardo's deception entailed, whatever new challenges this revelation might bring, Jade knew she could face them. With a deep breath of the crisp mountain air, Jade turned and walked back toward the light, ready to write the next chapter of her story, a story of resilience, truth, and the enduring power of a legacy built on love rather than deception.